Wait, you have a TV?
No. I just like to read the TV guide. Read the TV guide. You don't need a TV. Television addict! Television addict! Television addict!
Hey everybody, welcome. It's Ken Reed here, your TV guidance counselor on the show, TV Guidance Counselor, here to talk about classic television and whatever else pops into our heads as they have conversations with friends, acquaintances, new friends, old friends. I'm not going to sing the song from the Muppets, but you know, I could. I have a beautiful singing voice. Speaking of beautiful singing voices, my guest this week is musician and all-around just incredible human being, Cait O'Riordan. You may best know her as the bass player from the Pogues. She sang the song Haunted, which is maybe my favorite Pogue song. Her version is on the Straight to Hell soundtrack, a movie which she also appears in. But she is amazing. She's incredibly smart. You could hear her on Sirius Satellite Radio right now. She's on the YouTube channel. She has the Rocky O'Riordan Show, and you should listen to that because she has great taste in music. I've known her for years. If you were familiar with my little TBS reality show that I did, you can spot her in the front row of the show I did at the New York Comedy Festival. Just a little cameo appearance. Not intentional, but you can. And I've wanted to do an episode with her for a long time. She is an international woman of mystery and travels around a lot, so it's hard to pin her down. But thank you, global pandemic. She's back home in Dublin, and thank you, technology and satellites. We were able to do this, so it was great to catch up with her. I love how much homework she did for this show, and you will really love this episode. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of TV Guidance Counselor with my guest, Cait O'Riordan.
TV is my friend, and it has been always there for me in time of need.
Live via satellite from Ireland, our first guest from Ireland, Cait O'Riordan. How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there. It's the best we can do. Although I always joke that I've basically been training for lockdown for about 10 years.
How come?
Because I've just filled my home with books to read and things to watch and food to eat. So it's like this warm cocoon of distraction.
That sounds really nice.
Yeah, aside from the whole end of the world going on outside, I really don't mind being at home for months and months on end.
Man, I'm going insane. I'm so used to going out every night. 1, 2, 3 gigs a night. I'm like, I
haven't done stand-up since February, and that's weird because that should bother me more than it does because I've been doing stand-up for almost 20 years and I was in bands before that, and so pretty much I've been performing at least once a week since I was like 15.
Yeah.
But for some reason it's not bothering me.
That's so weird.
Yeah. So
maybe you just don't like people, Ken.
I mean, that might be part of it, but I don't think it's that I don't like people. It's that I just don't like most people.
Oh, well, there we go. That's fair.
Yeah. That's my punk rock
I like
soul.
all of the people.
Yeah. So I can edit who I allow into my home virtually or not. And so that's kind of a nice little thing.
Yeah. That doesn't sound so bad when you put it like that.
Yeah. It's not terrible, but you got out of New York kind of just in time, didn't you? You were there when it kicked off, right?
I was there until the end of May. I only left because my visa was about to expire.
Oh, geez.
Oh, yeah. When it's such a huge thing to remain, super compliant with the visa regs. And yeah, I do not mess with the visa.
No, you don't want to be banned for life. That's the worst.
Oh, imagine never being able to come back to the States. It would kill me. I love America. I love rock and roll. I love your stupid, I love every bad thing about America and every good thing. I couldn't bear to not be allowed back in again just because of a visa.
Did you come to the U.S. touring with the Pogues, or had they not toured the U.S. when you were playing with them?
Yeah, my first time in the States was the first Pogues tour of America.
Okay, so we
did the East Coast circuit.
So you did Boston, you probably did Avalon, or
we did Boston, we did Rhode Island, Lupos, we did the East Coast college circuit.
So it would have been like 86 or 87 probably, right?
86.
Okay. So the issue we picked here, you went 77 for obvious punk rock reasons, I'm assuming. This is April 30th to May 6th. And I'm always curious, growing up you mostly grew up in London, right?
Yeah.
Watching, because you probably didn't see a lot of this stuff, but what you did see of America, and then actually coming here, how it lived up to what you thought it would be.
I had a very clear idea in my head of what California would look like. Actually, Los Angeles. And when I got there, it didn't look anything like I thought it would. And I realized that in my head, I had a kind of Western, John Ford Western vision of those streets, you know, when you tie your horse up outside the salon. And then maybe you'd replace it with a fantastic old car like you'd see in Sunset Boulevard. And I honestly kind of thought it would look like that. And obviously it doesn't. That's what I thought, just these kind of old cowboy streets.
I guess Arizona, New Mexico, that area might have had some parts that still looked like that in the 80s. But yeah, definitely not California.
But
maybe.
no, when you land at the airport, you drive to the Holiday Inn or whatever, it's just another downtown conference zone, you know.
Oh yeah, they all look like the part by the airport.
And they all look the same. It's like, oh, this is disappointing. The first time you're here, unless somebody actually comes and gets you and says, we want to take you somewhere and show you around. And thank goodness the first time I played Boston, somebody just walked into the sound check, kind of grabbed us and said, I'm going to take you over the road to see the Red Sox.
That's so very Boston.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. And I remember in Chicago once, somebody came and got me and said, we're going to go to the Bucket O Suds. The Bucket O Suds. And we ended up in some place called Cicero, drinking buckets of suds.
I mean, you can't say no to that. You got to go see what that is. At least.
That. 1 minute you're on, this millionaire mile with all the fancy shops and museums, and the next thing you're out in a suburb having real life. It's fantastic.
So when do you feel like you really fell in love with New York? Like, did you move there later?
I've been spending like months at a time in New York for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
Like gigging there and then tagging along when people have been recording and stuff. I've spent so much time in New York, and I always thought up until like 3 years ago, I thought great place to visit, wouldn't want to live there. And then 3 years ago when I got my lovely work visa and I landed a job at the Irish Arts Centre in Manhattan, and I was looking for somewhere to live, and there was this place going in the East Village.
Oh, nice.
I thought, the East Village. And I had this memory of being ordered by the Pogue's manager, if I even hear that you're getting in a cab asking them to take you to the East Village, I'm sending you home. You're not to set foot in. You're not to set foot, because we all wanted to go to Alphabet City and meet the Ramones and
go to the bad part of town where all the fun stuff is.
And he was like, "You can't go there." We played the East Village. We played a place called The World on East 2nd Street and a place called Danceteria, which I later found out were there. So I think what was happening was we wanted to go off and wander off into the night. And that's when he was saying, no, you're coming back to Midtown. And that was always my problem. I thought New York was Midtown.
Right.
Until I went and lived in the East Village. And then I just thought, where has this been all my life? I belong here. There's a whole community of elderly punks.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, my tribe. Yeah. They're here. They're all concentrated in this one area. And there's gigs all around. Every old punk in town is playing the Bowery Electric or Niagara, the Jesse Malin Empire.
Yeah.
I just thought, this is my home.
It is weird because the East Village was not a dump, but it was like a really rough area throughout the 80s.
It was rough. It was rubble.
Really rough. But then in the last probably 10 years, it's like the most kind of homey, neighborhoody. It's like a little city within Manhattan that's just kind of like a nice homey city, but filled with old punks.
Yeah. Well, of course, like everywhere in New York, there's an amazing rate of acceleration in New York. And there's a lot now. A lot of the old buildings have been turned into luxury condos that rent out for $5,000 a month. So the elderly punks, the ones that are rent stabilized or rent controlled, they're still there, thank goodness. But everyone else is living up in the Hudson Valley or New Jersey or, same all over. I've got friends that lived in LA and they got forced out to Portland. Yeah. And then Portland's getting expensive now. So
that's like Boston. All the old 80s punks who grew up in Boston now live in New Hampshire.
Oh, man.
Just keep moving up as it gets cheaper. For me, it was good in the early 2000s because it meant I could go up and really raid some good record collections at the used record stores in New Hampshire. But other than that, it's not great. And London, the same thing. I was there last summer for the first time in 10 years, and it was even different from how I remembered it when I lived there.
Yeah. It's fast. It's happening all over the world, and the rate is incredible. I remember when Williamsburg became like the next place, and now suddenly Williamsburg's too expensive.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa.
I'm like, what do these people do for work that they can live in these places?
I've been in coffee shops at 11 in the morning surrounded by these, obviously wealthy 30-year-olds. And I'm just staring at it and saying, I know why I'm in a coffee shop at 11. How come you're in a coffee shop at 11?
Right.
What is it you do that lets you be here and be rich?
And can you tell me how I can have that?
I had my chance, if it had ever occurred to me when I was 30 to be a tech person, I'm sure, we'd all be sitting in Tribeca.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's very strange. But I am always fascinated with how sort of America lives up to just seeing it in TV and movies. And it's always interesting to me because for me, like when I first moved to London, having never been there and really only knowing it from Sid and Nancy and the Young Ones, it weirdly felt like a part of Boston I'd never been to. It was very comfortable. But I wonder if I had been from another part of the country, if it wouldn't have been like that. But it was something about it was very Boston-y.
Well, yeah. I mean, Boston is Dublin just turned up to 11, which means it's very Liverpool as well.
Oh, yes.
It's a port city with a rock and roll history and, the rough neighborhoods and the struggling with the empire, it got all that.
Oh, yeah. And the weird tribalism and the neighborhoody sort of very, very much and the sort of class stuff, which we don't have as much in the U.S., but we kind of inherited.
Well, you don't talk about,
No, but we do here, or at least we used to. It was a real conflict, especially where you'd have all the students come in and then the people, the locals would not like that. And it was a weird conflict, but it's...
You got to say, Good Will Hunting really kind of captured that, I thought. That had, it really caught that on film.
It did. After seeing so many things said here that just didn't feel right. Although Cheers, I think, captured a lot of it too, weirdly. Yeah, like the thing I always say about Cheers that's great is, and I don't think it reads for people who didn't grow up here as much, but the sort of core of that show is that it was about alcoholics.
Yeah.
And it's this bar in the middle of the day, and you have a mailman sitting next to a literal doctor, and they're all the same because they're all alcoholics.
Right, yeah.
And that's a weird thing you get here. That is, I didn't think read as well on that show. But I had Joe Brand on recently, and she was saying that, like, I had never been to a pub, and when I went to the UK, I went to a pub in the middle of the day, and it doesn't feel like a bar. It feels like you could just hang out there, and it's casual, and I don't even drink, and you just hang out there. But here, if you see somebody at a bar in the middle of the day, you're like, oh, something's wrong.
There's a reason.
Yeah. So not all that stuff always reads, but it's fascinating to look at it from the outside.
The Irish legacy.
Oh, indeed. Yes. The Maney side of my family from Cork is,
oh man.
Yeah. Oh boy. So we had this issue from 1977. So you're young. You're almost a teenager, young kid when this was out, and you're living.
I was 11.
11. Aware of the sort of punk rock thing that was happening, or? Oh
wait, I was 12. Sorry, I'm lying about my age already.
Shaving a year off. You are in Hollywood.
I was actually 12. Now I think about it. When I was thinking about it, it was a big year because I was living in London, and it was the Queen of England's Silver Jubilee. So that was 25 years she'd been queen. And that kind of started to dominate the whole year. Like at school, we had to like sing God Save the Queen and things, like we cared. And but at the same time, the Sex Pistols were on TV and on the front page of all the newspapers, and that fantastic Jamie Reed image of the Queen with the safety pin through her mouth. We were seeing that. So it was a real year, like you think, okay, you know, the story the grown-ups are feeding us is one thing, but there's this other thing happening. Like, that's when life got interesting.
Yeah, were you aware that that was going on where you lived? Like that the Sex Pistols was going on in London, or did it seem far away?
It was really visceral. Like I clearly remember. Now, you know, my memory's shot on a lot of things, but I clearly remember the day that the Sex Pistols infamously were on a TV show and swore.
Oh, Bill Grundy.
Live,
yeah.
Bill Grundy. It was a tea time show. We'd go to school, we'd come home, we'd eat our tea. And that particular day, I then went off to the St. John's Ambulance Brigade cadets to learn how to do, you know, first aid stuff. But when I got to the scout hut where we did it, there were two girls and they were both saying, did you see that? Our parents are really upset. Our parents are, you know, something terrible happened. We're like, what happened? They said, there were these boys on the telly and they swore and our parents are calling the TV company. We're like, wow, this is amazing. And then, of course, the next day it was front page news and then everybody was talking about it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. This is just happening 30 minutes up the road from us. Wow.
Yeah. Because that's the thing I always wonder is how far away the major city feels. Because I imagine that went through the whole country. That kind of, you know, and if people up north.
Must have done.
Yeah,
the place where I was living was halfway between Heathrow Airport and like the Tower of London.
Okay.
Exactly on the edge, that kind of conurbation heading out to the airport.
Zone 5.
We were literally a 30-minute train from Waterloo Station. And I distinctly remember at some point after that, I was walking up our high street and I saw two kids in bin bags walking down the street. And I remember how frightened I was because of all this fuss that had been going on and this thing, like the parents just being angry. And obviously, like the world was burning down in flames and everything. They were more angry about the Sex Pistols than about any other outrage that was going on in the 70s, which is ridiculous.
Yeah, you had the miner strike. There was the garbage strike. There were just like piles of garbage everywhere.
Piles of garbage in the street, bodies not getting cremated. And, you know, the power used to go out. We had piles of candles stockpiled. You go in the supermarket, you know, when you see footage of Russia and the shelves were bare, it was like that in London in the 70s. It was wild, but they were getting upset about the Sex Pistols.
In some ways it's like it's easier to get upset about the Sex Pistols because it's like a scapegoat than to get upset about being in an almost dystopian world. And
otherwise you have to engage with systematic class warfare, you know, and who's going to do that on a Monday, you know?
17-year-olds. But I think that people who grew up here, when we look at the 1970s in America, it was so like good times, you know, Boston singing Amanda and, you know, they're listening to Zeppelin and all this stuff. And even though there was stuff like gas rationing and that kind of stuff, it was not like it was in London. I mean, I don't think people understand how kind of scary it seems like it really was.
Yeah. Like punks learned very quickly that if they had the safety pins in their face, at some point someone was going to grab it and pull it. You know, that was happening all the time. You know, I was doing first aid on people. I used to do first aid at Twickenham Rugby Stadium. And I got so used to stitching up people's hands and stuff. And then people would get their faces ripped and you'd say, what happened to you? And they say, oh, I had, you know, they didn't call them piercings then. They just say, oh, I had pins and I had metal in my face. Just to like, well, don't do that.
Right. I have a great solution. I'm going to write you a prescription for not doing that. Yeah.
But literally, I mean, these things, Teds, they were called Teddy Boys. And they'd been a thing in the 1950s, and my dad had been a teddy boy. And then they kind of re-emerged around the time of punk to fight the punks.
Yeah.
It was like rock and roll versus punk rock. And they'd have these huge mass fights on the South Coast. It's mad times.
It's so weird, and this is like my old man talk, but the world we live in post 2000, when you can go to like Target or Asda or something, and your cashier has purple hair and like a studded belt, and
yes,
it's crazy because when you would dress like that when we were growing up, you were inviting someone to just punch you for no reason, and on the good side, if you saw someone else dressed like that, you're like, oh, we're probably friends, like we have something in common, we probably like the same stuff, and that's not the case now.
It's that thing, it's that weird acceleration, which I don't know if it is a property of the 21st century or if it's a property of me being middle-aged. I'm not sure, or it's everything goes so fast. Everyone has tattoos now.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, if you had a tattoo, it meant you just got out of Wormwood Scrubs.
Yeah.
Or you'd come off a merchant navy ship. You know, it was really specific. And now, like you say, every kid's got them.
There's no like sort of, I mean, I'm sure there is, and I just don't know about it, but those sort of visual, physical transgressions you could do as a rebellion or as a code to indicate to people various things, like I have tattoos, don't mess with me, or I have tattoos and you know what they mean, so like we were both on ships or something. You don't really have those sort of secret languages anymore.
That's really true. How do you signify? Maybe that's what social media replaces, that we're all telling who we are online now rather than through those visual cues.
Yeah, or you don't need to as much, I guess, because people through social media can sort of find their people with common interests, and they don't have to be on the lookout for like hidden messages to be like, oh, that's one.
That's it. If you want to find your people, you just put it in a search bar.
Right.
And there you go. You find your people. Yeah. I appreciate tribes really now. I love that rockabillys are so fanatic about keeping the flame alive, and the old punks are, I don't know, punks seem sadder than old rockabillys to me, because there's an awful lot of old punks that think Sid Vicious was a role model in some way. No, you feel sorry for Sid. You don't think Sid is a hero.
And he was a kid. He
never stood a chance.
Yeah, when I look back at, was he 19, 20? Like, that's so young. And young. I talked to Kathy Valentine recently, and she, who's great. And I didn't know, but she was at that Sex Pistols show in Texas. She said to me, she goes, I liked that kind of music, but I was sitting there watching this band, and specifically Sid Vicious, and I was like, why would you go on stage and just want people to hate you and like physically attack you? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And it was someone who they weren't consciously doing that. Like, that's not the normal. There's no reason you would do that.
They were obviously, they should never have been there. They shouldn't have been on that tour. I mean, the fact that they were in Austin, it was in San Francisco when they actually broke up.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But they should never, to put them in Texas and San Francisco, it's monstrous. Malcolm McLaren and whoever was the business side of that, it was a war crime against musicians, I think, putting the Sex Pistols into that.
It was almost like a weird early version of reality TV, almost like manipulating people to get this entertainment value for the whoever's the higher up at the expense of these people.
That idea that so long as it generates column inches and headlines, then it's good. Just no.
Yeah.
That really lives on. It's like Australia is the last outpost of that kind of mentality. Their school of journalism is still very much, they want the car crash.
Oh, interesting.
And yeah, and you just think it's because they're so far away. They haven't quite.
They take a while to catch up.
Past that state yet.
Well, I guess they also gave us like Rupert Murdoch, and that sort of world spawned from there.
Yeah, so if you look at Rupert Murdoch and see anything other than a "don't be like that" guy, then you need help.
Yeah, if you don't recognize cautionary examples of very bad people,
but people do look at him and they just see, a billionaire.
Yeah, it's people who sort of watch things the wrong way. Like to your point with Sid Vicious, and one of the shows, All in the Family, which I don't know if you're familiar with All in the Family with Archie Bunker. It was a U.S. remake of with Alf Garnett, and people. And I don't know if this was the case in England, but people here sort of watch that show wrong. In that you're supposed to feel bad for Archie. He's kind of a sad old man. And he's racist and scared. And instead people went, he's telling it like it is.
Oh, that's not good.
No. And I feel like that's the same kind of thing where someone looks at Sid Vicious and they're like, yeah, badass. And not just like, wow, that's really sad that kid got chewed up and used.
People do those. So many old punks and young punks. That's the worst thing. Oh, Sid's great. It's like people see Shane McGowan and they want to buy him a drink. And I like, no.
Yeah.
How can you think that you see poor Shane, the state of him in a wheelchair, and you think, what that guy needs is more alcohol?
I think it ends up being more about the person, so they can be like, I bought him a drink, and not.
People do it for themselves. Yeah, in a nutshell. And
they don't look at him like a person, probably. It's like
he's the pagan god of alcohol.
Right. Right. And it's, and there's a long history of that. I mean, we've as a society, especially like people who are artists, we definitely hold up on a pedestal their addictions and things like Edgar Allan Poe and their tragic deaths and their things like that as part of what made them great when it really was probably in the way.
Completely. I did a whole thing. I went, when I got out of rehab myself, I went straight into college and I stayed there for 8 years studying psychology. And I had a lot of access to the academic literature around the role of schizophrenia and addiction in creativity, because there's a lot of people that try to connect them. Mm-hmm. But every time, all it means is that they die young, or they get so debilitated they can't work. All addiction or genuine mental illness do to creative people is rob time from them.
Yeah,
when they creating, and yet, like you say, people glorify the addiction or the mental illness. So just,
it's like the Syd Barrett thing. It becomes sort of a mythology instead of. Yeah, it's just weird and it's sad, and I'd like to think we're moving slightly away from it, but not really. Who knows?
That would be an interesting line of academic inquiry. It's like, why do people celebrate something that's so negative? What's the positive they see in it? Anyway, that's my next thesis.
Yes, that would be a very interesting thesis. Do you know Anne Magnuson at all?
Oh, no. Anne Magnuson. Was she a performance artist?
She was in New York. She was friends with like Keith Haring and Basquiat and all those people. Yes. But she had an interesting take on that. And I'm still, I don't know if I'm totally on board with it, but she was like, more in the respect of why do people have this weird thing where they want to see people who create things sort of fail sometimes, and she's like, well, society needs to sacrifice their gods. Whoa. I was like, that's heavy. I don't know if but that might be part of it. I don't know.
Wow. Yeah.
Who knows? But speaking of sacrificing gods, on the cover of this issue, this was a big deal because we have Frost Nixon interview. What
a great cover.
And they made a movie.
I couldn't believe it when you sent it to me. I was like, oh, ka-ching.
Yeah, this was this sums up 1970s America better than anything I could think of.
And it's weird now because I've seen the film which is fantastic and fascinating. So actually seeing that it really was a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
It's like, do you remember it? You're too young.
I don't remember it when it happened, but I I'd seen the actual footage prior to the movie. So, I remember seeing it. I rewatched it after the movie came out, and it was really surreal. It was weird. It was hard to tell which was the real one after a while.
Yeah. Nixon doesn't even seem like a real person. Like, how could anybody have voted for him or trusted him?
Yeah. But I wonder if, fingers crossed we make it 20 years past where we're at now here with who we have in office. But I wonder if we'll have a movie in 20 years of this, this time.
Yeah.
And
there's already a movie. There's Brendan Gleeson, a great Irish actor. I just saw a trailer of him playing Donald Trump.
Oh, poor man.
Oh, well, wow. Is this a bit premature? But I wish I could remember what it was about. Oh, it's about James Comey.
Ah. But that's...
Your man from Dumber and Dumber is playing the head of the FBI. Yeah.
Oh, Jeff Daniels?
Jeff Daniels,
Oh,
yeah.
Weird. I mean, it's weird that... So we got the Nixon Frost movie. This is 77. When we get the movie, 2007 or something? I mean, we're talking 30, 40 years later.
Yeah.
And I feel like you need that kind of distance from it to really do anything interesting with the thing. So it's weird to do it contemporaneously. What are you...
Again, it's that acceleration of life now. But obviously, it's probably more an attempt to just be cathartic in the moment rather than to provide any kind of historical overview.
Yeah, or take control over it in some way. We're controlling the narrative.
It's
who knows?
been 4 whole years.
That's true. Oh, it feels like 100 and 2 weeks.
Really, it really does. It's really, has it been 4 years? I so clearly remember that night the results came in. It's was that 4 years ago?
Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm if this ends, which God hope it does, what am I going to do with all the time I've been using consumed by anxiety and just what's happening?
Oh my God, what are we going to do? Yeah.
It's what did I do?
Go out blinking into the sunlight.
Yeah. I can get hobbies again and make things and read books.
Yeah.
So I imagine people felt that way about Nixon at the time here. But I don't know.
There was a very clear story arc, though, I think, from the perspective of 40 years. There was the allegations from great proper journalists in a proper newspaper that everybody read newspapers and trusted their news sources. And then there was the news story, and then there was due process. And then there was impeachment, and then there was a new president. It all seems like a very healthy, rigorous story arc from the distance. I wonder how people processed it at the time, if it seemed that we can just trust that the right thing is going to happen here, because that's what we've lost.
Yeah. Yeah. We assumed people have shame, and not everyone does.
No. I mean, particularly your current president, it's there's literally nothing he can do that would make the people that love him not love him anymore.
Yeah. It's insane. It's insane. And the fact that, when I hear people talk about, I was talking to Jello Biafra recently, and, obviously he's very anti-Nixon, but he was saying how Nixon was just this monster at the time, and they thought of him a bad guy, and he still sees him as this bad guy. But looking at it from a distance, Nixon still resigned. He was I did a bad thing. The best thing here to do is do the right thing and resign.
Yeah. Old school.
Yeah. And that ain't happening. It's
That's funny. And over in London at the same time, they used to, up until some point, politicians used to resign in the English Parliament, and that doesn't happen anymore.
No, it's because it takes one person to not do it, and then the rest of them go, oh, wait, you can not do that? Oh. Nothing happens? Oh, it's when did Thatcher get in? It was 78 or 79?
79, she became the leader of the Conservative Party.
Okay, so 77, you still hadn't quite got your your evil avatar of conservatism.
Yeah. No, the whole neon-con thing hadn't quite hit yet. I think Reagan and Thatcher got power the same time.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the Heaven 17 song. I think it mentions them both at the same time. Fascist groove thing. So yeah, it was interesting to read this article and look at something that was created contemporary with this actually happening.
Right.
And for TV Guide, it's a pretty well-written article, which is kind of interesting.
That's interesting, yeah.
And then there's an article on Chevy Chase in here, which I don't know if you saw that one.
I did see it, and it's funny because he seems such a lame guy, but he's being treated like a superstar in the issue.
He was the king of so he was in the first season of Saturday Night Live.
Right.
And he was the breakout star, and he quit because he's like, I'm going to be a movie star. And he was seen as this like irreverent, sort of badass, like new comedy. But which incidentally, he played in Steely Dan before that, which is hilarious.
Played? Really?
He was the drummer in Steely Dan for a short time, pre-Saturday Night Live.
That's a real rock and roll weirdness. I didn't know.
Yep. And he put out a music record in the early 80s too. And like Paul Simon played, it was weird. But so he quit SNL. He's 33 in 77. He was a little older than everyone else. And he was supposed to be this new badass, irreverent king of comedy. And he pissed that away real quick.
So did he go straight into the National Lampoon movies, or was that a bit later?
It was a little bit later. He got offered a bunch of movies after SNL, and he admits this now, he was an insufferable asshole. And so people just wouldn't work with him, and a bunch of stuff fell through. And so one of the first things he was in, which is a kind of a wonderful mess of a movie, is this movie called Under the Rainbow. And it's him and Carrie Fisher, who were dating at the time. And it's a movie about all the behind the scenes shenanigans that went on during the Wizard of Oz shooting the movie. So it's like the little people are all partying. And so it's a weird movie and people hated it.
No.
But
That's such an interesting premise though.
Yeah, I would love to see it remade because it's got to be fascinating. But that was a big bomb. And then he did a few movies after that. So it wasn't until, was it 82 when National Lampoon came out, that then he started becoming more of a box office person. But even then he's playing a dad, which is not how he saw himself. So it's,
and it's National Lampoon. He's never going to win an Oscar.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, he's not one of those guys that had like a serious side. Like he wasn't Bill Murray in it where he's going to do a serious role.
Yeah.
And it's funny reading this where they're talking about him being like a young up and coming, he's going to be the future.
Yeah. I love that about the whole issue. Just thinking, we know what happens with all of these things. Chevy Chase didn't happen really.
No, he, a friend of mine was on the show Community with him, and they were saying he used to fight with everybody on the set of that show. This is in the 2000s. And someone was like, oh, Chevy, we emailed you the new script or whatever. And he goes, well, how am I supposed to get that? My email's in New York. He thought it was like a mailbox. Like,
oh, bless.
I'm in LA. How am I supposed to get stuff from my email? That's back in New York.
Oh, wow. Wow. I thought I was having trouble with technology.
So that shows you where he was at the time.
Wow.
But it is again, this contemporary thing where just seeing how they saw him at that time and how you and I see him now, it's very different.
Yeah. It's sad.
Yeah. Again, it's that, I mean, he had addiction problems. It turns out, I mean, it was the 70s. Everyone was doing mountains of cocaine, apparently. But he injured himself doing SNL because he used to do falls and like pratfalls for comedy.
Oh.
And he hurt his back really bad. And for decades, he had a pain pill problem.
Yeah. It's amazing how common that is.
Yeah. And I think we're more aware of it now, but especially then it was like, well, the doctor gave me this thing. It can't be bad.
Right.
And so no one knew about, I mean, that was really one of the sources of like, he is kind of an asshole too, but one of the main sources of him in the 80s being so miserable to everybody was that.
Right. Oh,
So
well, we'll make allowances for him then.
Yes, I feel a bit bad for him. And he does seem to be filled with regret for some of these things now.
Yeah.
But
Oh, well.
interesting guy. So you said you have pages of notes. Did you go night by night?
I did.
So,
I mean, I took it literally.
Yes.
I thought,
thank you.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's 1977 and I'm planning my weekend, my week of evening viewing.
Not everyone follows the rules, so thank you very much.
Oh, man.
So what'd you do
I'm
on
a
Saturday?
nerd. I was like, okay, where's my pen?
It is kind of fun. Some people complain it's like SATs, but I find it fun to do it. So
I loved it. I tell you what really threw me. I'm leafing through it, scroll, and I'm kind of 2 pages into the actual TV listings, and I just think, is this the TV listings? Because there's so few channels, and it just didn't register that this, these little bumps of numbers was the actual listings. And it's just like, wow. I was already, I think I was already 3 days in.
where's the stuff? Yeah.
I realized, I've missed 8 p.m. Saturday. I mean, I'm into the week here.
And this is a New York edition, and they would have had more channels than most of the rest of the U.S.
Whoa, yeah. Amazing.
So, and I mean, you had 3 channels in the UK at the time, right? Channel 4 wasn't until 84.
Yeah, but I mean, when we came to America, it just seemed like an incredibly huge amount of choice to us. But of course, now it's exponential.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember that what blew us away in 1986 was just like really a couple of handfuls of channels.
They have 6 channels?
6 channels!
Oh my God. So what'd you do on Saturday?
Well, Saturday, did you notice that it was the pilot of Charlie's Angels?
Yep.
Then with Tommy Lee Jones.
Yes.
Sold.
Yeah. It's the pilot movie of Charlie's Angels. 77, this was like the coolest height of these things that you could get at this time. I forget that Tommy Lee Jones was in it. Right after he got out of Harvard, which is super weird that he went to Harvard to me.
Tommy, the perfect man.
Yeah. And you had to watch Charlie's Angels. I mean, it was everybody's dream.
It was huge. It was massive, and it like everybody liked it. Girls loved it. We'd pick our favorite angel. Boys obviously were obsessed with it. Mums and dads liked it. It dominated. It really dominated pop culture. And it's funny, it just never occurred to me there was a pilot. Yeah. It's one of those things like Venus. You just assume it emerged fully formed.
It just existed. No one had to say, "Oh, this is good." Who was your favorite angel?
I liked the sensible one. Was she called Sabrina?
Oh, yes. That's Kate.
We had the same hair.
Kate Jackson, I think. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because she was the sensible nerd with straight, shiny, dark hair.
Yeah, and saved the day.
Well, yeah, she was obviously the brains of the operation. There was the glamorous brunette, and there was the uber blonde, and then there was the sensible nerdy one. I was like, there I am.
Something for everyone, really.
Something for everybody. But I loved those shows. It was so exciting.
It's funny that although it makes sense because most of the shows that we exported were action shows because it translates.
Of course, international. Yeah.
Everybody.
And there's no nuance.
Right. Yeah. They used to call those jiggle shows here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That network that aired Charlie's Angels, they literally called it the Jiggle Network because it was like, that was the kind of stuff they were showing. That was their reputation this time.
Wow, that's weird.
It is a little strange. Yeah, CBS.
I always feel like the successor to Charlie's Angels in my brain was the Dukes of Hazzard.
Yeah. But, and I don't know if it reads in other countries so Southern. So that like growing up in Massachusetts, when Dukes of Hazzard would come on, I'd be like, oh.
Oh, that's so interesting. Like to us, it's just, yay, America.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it would be like, I don't know what a super Northern show would have been in the UK at the time, but I guess it'd be someone in London and some, you know, I don't know, Alvitas and Pet or something like that comes on.
I guess so. Yeah. Well, Coronation Street was the big one because that was from Manchester. But of course, I mean, the geographical distances in the UK are tiny fragments of what your geographical distances are. Yeah, that's so funny. So someone in Massachusetts would, so the Dukes of Hazzard would have been Alien.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Any of those Southern shows like Hee Haw, Dukes of Hazzard, like it would just feel like I did not understand that word. I was like, I don't get what this is.
Wow, that's so interesting.
I mean,
that's so fun. Like to us, everything like Dukes of Hazzard, Charlie's Angels, Hawaii Five-0, it was all just America.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. It is, but it's like Dukes of Hazzard was probably just as alien to me as it would have been to you.
Amazing.
Which is crazy, and I forget who said this originally, but I think I heard it from Alan Moore. And he said, in the UK, 100 miles is a long distance. And in the US, 100 years is a long time.
Wow.
And I'm like, that is exactly what that's perfect.
What a great perspective. The Alan Moore.
Yeah. I don't think it's his concept, but that's where I first heard it from. And it really did explain the difference where I was like, oh, yeah, of course.
True. Yeah.
Because
it's so funny in America, people talking about an old building.
Yeah. I used to joke about that on stage, like when my friends would come visit. And, you know, I live in the oldest part of America. And I'd be like, oh, this cemetery is from, 1692. And they'd be like, oh, we have one from 4. Like, fair enough, you win. Yeah, that's not very old. But even for me, like when I go to other parts of the country, like when I've been in Austin, Texas or something like that, everything's new. I'm like, the oldest thing you have here is from 1970.
Yeah, it's funny. That's the joy of travel, though.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And I haven't done much traveling. The only other country I've been to is England.
But you're in America. Why
true.
You guys don't need to travel anywhere.
That's true. Traveling to LA is the same distance for me as going to London.
Yeah. So, you have everything you need right there.
And then some. And a lot of stuff I don't need. So that was your whole Saturday. You're watching that 2-hour pilot movie.
Let me see. That was it. Now, what I was thinking was if for some reason that channel was taken off the air, say there was like terrorists stormed the building, shut it down, then I would revert to my usual TV viewing, which I like old movies, and The Best Years of Our Lives was on as well, which is Myrna Loy, who was in the Thin Man movies with William Powell.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore her. So one way or another, I'd be watching sleek, stylish women on screen.
Femme fatales were making their way through at some point.
Fabulous women.
Yeah, I love the fact that old movies were on all the time when we were growing up. And we got this education in 50 or 60 years of entertainment. Really, the only reason we did was because it was cheap.
Probably, yeah, that makes total sense. But I think it was a great grounding in life, just really good dialogue always, and outfits and stories, and it's really, I think it's good to waste your life watching old movies.
I agree.
Like you say about, you build your little cocoon. It's like, well, yeah. If you spend your night out in the streets, like dodging drunks and shit flying around and people starting fights, it's nice to go home and put on the telly and watch an old black and white movie.
Yeah, like His Girl Friday or some noir movie or something. It's always yeah.
I'd love to see His Girl Friday.
I love that movie. So then Sunday, what'd you do?
Well, I've kind of leapt ahead because Charlie's Angels is actually on Monday night.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. But Saturday night, talking to old movies, Airport 1975
Yes.
with Linda Blair,
Yes.
which I would love to see now, knowing Linda Blair only as The Omen.
Have you seen Airport 1975?
I wonder if I have. I have a very clear memory in my head. See, when I saw that, I went, oh, yeah, I know that movie. And then later in the listings, there's an advert for the movie that it actually is that I thought, which is the one with Dean Martin.
Yes.
Which is a different airport.
That was Airport 1976. They remade them every year. There were these huge disaster movies, and the movie Airplane, the comedy movie, is a parody of these movies.
Yes, and see, in my head, I somehow thought Airplane was based on one of those, and then I saw a whole thing about how it was based on a black and white movie.
Some of it is.
Yeah.
But I think the I'm landing the plane thing is, but the spectacle, because these were like cavalcade of stars, like it's Charlton Heston and Sid Caesar and Linda Blair.
Yeah.
And they're just crazy. Like I rewatched some of them in the last couple of years, and they're these overblown 70s. I mean, they're really enjoyable for how just silly they are.
Oh yeah. What's that Gene Wilder one where the train smashes through?
Oh, the
Silver Streak?
Yes.
Yeah. That to me was like the apotheosis of that kind of massive, what's the next big thing we can do before CGI?
Yeah.
Actually, what's the biggest smash ups we can do?
Yeah, that was
I enjoy those things.
They're fun. I mean, they're fun, like big disaster movies or, car pictures or Cannonball Run and that kind of stuff. Linda Blair is an interesting case. She went a little cuckoo, and she just lives on a horse farm now.
Wow, that's interesting. It's funny, isn't it? Those women who just retreat from the world, like Brigitte Bardot, I think she went full Animal Farm, and Doris Day, didn't she do the same thing? Yeah,
and what's her name from Vertigo? From Kim Novak. Yeah, Kim Novak lives in a farm and just like paints.
Just quit acting.
Yeah, I guess that's a thing you could do at some point.
Interesting. I've scribbled down something here. The Phantom of the Opera with Herbert Lom.
Yes.
Because it reminded me, in the UK in the 70s, BBC Two had these summer horror double bills. I was going to say Hammer Horror, but I checked it and it wasn't all Hammer Horror. It was any studio that did horror movies. And it was a huge thing.
That would make sense.
There's a guy here, John Connolly. He's a writer. He does these great books. His detective is called Charlie Parker. And it's all angel and devil stuff. But I was chatting with him, and somehow it came, we both grew up just watching all the old horror movies, and it really imprinted an entire generation.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's, what we're saying, you grew up watching all those movies. I had an entire education in horror movies, just watching these things. But, of course, Herbert Lom is also the inspector in the Pink Panther.
Right.
So how scary is he, really?
Right. And this is the Hammer one. This is the Hammer Phantom of the Opera from 1962. And those movies, when we got them here, they were really shocking because they were in color and like really gory and sexed up. And weirdly, so when I talked to Dave Vanian of The Damned, he said the same thing about watching these horror double features in the 70s on BBC. And then, although the weird thing with him was he told me when he watched them, he just wanted to live in the houses.
Oh, wow. Well, he's a special case.
Yes, which I was like, oh, well, maybe not everyone had that. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of brilliant to put those on in the summer when kids are up late, they're not in school, and they can watch these horror double features. And they're sort of
it was a ritual. Yeah. Well, our thing was our dad would go out to his social club. We'd sit up, watch the movies, and at some point he'd come back with a big bucket of KFC.
Oh, that's heaven.
We'd all eat the KFC and Vincent Price would be on the screen, digging somebody up.
Oh yeah, they probably showed those like Edgar Allan Poe, Vincent Price movies, like the Tomb of Ligeia, and
I mean, I have distinct memories of sitting there in my nightie, and there's, they're breaking walls, and there's a skeleton inside the wall, or they open a coffin and there's nail scratches on the lid of the coffin. We're like,
yeah, oh yeah, it's the perfect movie for that, and it's weird that. I think those of us that grew up on the Friday, Saturday night watching those kind of things, those movies, which are of horrible things, I mean, they're horror movies, are like weirdly comforting childhood memories.
Yeah, it's weird. When I think now, the other thing about it I had to look up is they were on really late. They were on until midnight or beyond, which is just like, I didn't realize we were allowed to stay up that late when we were kids.
I guess
we had to stay up till Dad came home and fed us.
Yeah. I mean, I've found that bedtime rules didn't matter if a parent was home and something they liked was on.
That was it. He's been out drinking with his mates, then we get to stay up all night.
Yeah. And he's like, I'll watch this when I get home.
I think it then sits there all through the Wolf Man making jokes.
But what a like weirdly like charming, sweet family moment.
Yeah. Well, whatever bonds.
Yeah.
Bonds you.
You find them where you can get them. And yeah, I still will get comforted like on a Friday, Saturday night. I'm like, let's throw on an old horror movie and just kind of like, it's like a warm blanket,
I loved the Hammer horror. They were a bit scary, but the old black and white ones, the old Frankenstein, the old Wolfman, the old vampire movies, they were the best. Yeah,
the Universal ones were great. The Wolfman is amazing.
The Wolfman's he's the boss.
Yeah. Yeah, and just you feel so bad for Lon Chaney Jr. and he's like, because that was the only one that was like that tragic character, the others were just monsters. Have you ever seen the Spanish Dracula?
No. Is it called the Spanish Dracula?
It is. So when they were shooting the Bela Lugosi one, as a way to help finance it, they co-produced it with a Spanish movie studio. And so they'd shoot the Universal Dracula during the day, and then on the same sets, they'd shoot the Spanish one with a different cast. And it's amazing. And it came out they thought it was a lost movie, and it came out a few years ago on like a DVD when they released a DVD of a regular Dracula we all know. And it's amazing. It's so weird to see it because you're so familiar with the Dracula we've all seen, and this is on the same set.
On the same set.
Shot at the same time, but with different actors, and it has a different tone. It's really good. And
how do the Spanish play it? Is it more dramatic?
In some ways, but it's also more of like a tragic romance, which would make sense. It's more of like it's more of a romance. It has like a different tone. It's really weird to see.
So less about fetishizing the Dracula character and more about a story.
Yeah. It's so weird for someone to tell you like, oh, that movie you've seen 1,000 times? Here's that movie with different people.
Oh,
at the same
that's
time.
like when someone says, that Bob Dylan song? You say, yeah, and they said, have you heard the Finnish death metal version of Tangled Up in Blue? You're like, what?
I do love a good wrong genre cover, though, I will say.
Yeah. Even just for one listen, it's always good to hear.
A John Cale's version of Heartbreak Hotel, which just sounds like Nick Cave.
Note to self.
Oh man, it's from 76 or 77, and it sounds like this pure evil. It sounds like Nick Cave, but like 10 years earlier. It's amazing.
Nice. That does sound intriguing. I love John Cale. I'm so glad he's still alive.
Yeah, I saw him.
Weird thing to say, but oh my god.
Yeah, he's got to be in his 80s now.
He did a whole series of gigs like 2 years ago at Brooklyn Academy of Music with like young guests coming up and singing with him. and he was just magnificent.
Oh yeah, I saw him at this place, Johnny D's in Somerville, and it was like people were like eating dinner while he was playing. It was like a dinner theater, and he was just so put out by it, understandably, but it was just really weird.
Yeah, that does sound weird. He's not a supper club guy.
No, but he was amazing. It was a really good show. But the people there were just kind of like eating chicken wings and watching John Carroll.
Wow. Yeah, that's so weird. I did a bunch of gigs with Spider with this whole poetry thing, and it was on the City Winery circuit. And at first I was like, that's gonna suck. Because they're not gigs, they're restaurants with a stage shoved in the corner. But maybe it just depends on the music, because our audience all just came up down the front.
Yeah. I think City Wonder, because I've done a bunch of gigs there too, and they seem to have done it correctly, where they've like built the whole experience around the gigs, so they've integrated it well. But some places don't. Yeah.
Also, of course, City Winery, the whole point is to get pissed.
Yes. It's right in the name there.
Yeah, it does what it says. Yes. So, yeah, everyone's nicely drunk anyway.
They're all happy to see that. But, like, the Flesheaters played City Winery in Boston.
How was that?
It was weird. I mean, it was, it's Chris D, and it was basically a pickup band. It's Chris D's like backing band, and they played more of like their more sort of John Doe country type stuff, and not as much, but it worked.
I saw them last year, and it was Bowery Ballroom, and it was magnificent. And it was John Doe and Dave Alvin and that woman Julie. Oh yeah, comes out with the operatic voice. That was good. Steve Berlin was in the band.
Oh wow, that's a band that like Minute to Pray, a Second to Die. Like everyone should own that record, and they don't.
Yeah, I was surprised how many people don't know the Flesheaters.
Yeah, I don't know why either. Like they never get talked about in that LA punk scene or the Slash Records thing.
Everyone talks about X.
Yep, Gun Club.
Like, well, then you'd love these guys.
Yeah, but
he's a bit weird though, isn't he? He's a bit John Langford. He's like his own worst enemy in a lot of ways. He's like, there's. You could package yourself up a bit easier.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
People like X, and X scene's a monster.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. It doesn't make a ton of sense.
It makes no sense.
But we're not in charge. Maybe we should be about what people like.
I would abuse my power.
Oh, I would too. Why have it otherwise? We would just dictate what record collections people had.
It would be bad if I was in charge.
Yeah, that's gonna be my thought experiment for the weekend. Everyone has these 10 records and only these 10 records.
Terrible things could I do to people?
Yes. Cool. So you did Phantom of the Opera, and then did you do Sunday?
Of course, I did every day. I'm
Excellent.
A nerd. Actually, I really got stuck into Saturday. I was really imagining like, terrorist invasions and power cuts and things like, what if we can't watch that? What if we can't watch that? So there was one documentary, just being a nerd, 6 American Families at 8:30, and it was referring to a family and a guy that had to patrol the slums of Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's the new Williamsburg.
Yeah. But
this is where all the musicians that couldn't afford Williamsburg are in Bed-Stuy now, and there's craft breweries and nice cafes. Like, wow, that's only 40 years ago.
New York 77, there's an amazing documentary called New York 1977, The Coolest Year in Hell. And I forget, 1977 in New York was the year of the Son of Sam. It was the blackout, the 2-day huge blackout in Manhattan where everyone went insane. And it was also when hip hop started. So there were these, like, they'd have Africa Bombata would have DJ battles in parks where they'd crack open streetlights and plug in their turntables.
Wow.
And you had punk there at 77 was kind of when it really was crescendoing. And so it was this weird year in New York. And
it must have been amazing.
People were burning out, like the Bronx was on fire because all these slumlords were burning down their buildings so they could get the insurance.
Yeah.
So it was like the Warriors. It was...
Right. So that I would have actually loved that. Which is, I would have thrived.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of romanticize that era, like the old 42nd Street and the Times Square and all that stuff. But it's interesting to see a documentary of, a guy, and it's a black guy too, I think, who has to patrol that area, just as a security guy, and that's crazy. Really
interesting. But I wouldn't have watched it because at the same time, Dolly is on, and her guest is Captain Kangaroo. But did you notice the programming? A rival channel up against Dolly has put the Porter Wagoner show.
Yes.
Which is so, bitchy.
Yeah, they would do that, try to split the audiences. Yeah, this was Dolly's first variety show. She had a second one in the 80s, which was really good.
Yeah.
And this is a weird one. She usually had oddly kind of cool musical guests on.
Right.
Captain Kangaroo not being one of them. But this was a fun show. Like, she's just a born entertainer. Like, she's
wonderful.
Yeah.
Why isn't she in charge?
We would all be in a much better place if she was in charge. She did a Christmas special in 1990 that I watch every year. And it's Dolly Parton's Christmas, Down Home Family Christmas. And it's her in Dollywood with her family. And it's crazy. Like, she just shows up dressed as a reindeer for no reason. They're singing all these crazy songs. She interviews her parents. It's so weird. And it's just the best.
That sounds lovely. Have you seen her reading bedtime stories to children this year?
Yeah.
Well, that's just like,
She single-handedly pays for the educations of, like, all the kids in Tennessee.
Yeah.
And has for years.
She's so special.
And an amazing songwriter, too.
Oh, on top of everything else, yeah. She could write her songs and she could do a Diane Warren. She could just write these amazing songs and just never have to interact with the world. But instead, she's just out there. She is Santa Claus. Did you see at 9 o'clock Starsky and Hutch are on?
Yes.
And they have to pretend to be dancers. I'd like to see that.
Yes. They pose as dancers to trip up an extortion ring operating out of a plush Hollywood dancing studio.
Take my money. I want to see it. I would love to see. Starsky and Hutch were huge as well.
Oh, yeah.
They dominated the zeitgeist as well. And the blonde one, he was a pop star in the UK. I don't know if he started in America.
He did.
Did he?
He was a teen idol, which is weird because he looked like he was 50. But this particular episode, playing the character of Marcia Stearns, is Sandra Curry, who's Cherie Curry from The Runaways' older sister.
No.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great connection.
And I've had her on the show. She's fascinating. She was in tons of 70s TV. But yeah, Cherie and Marie Curry, because they're twins. But yeah, she's in this episode. And Paul Michael Glaser is from Boston, who's Starsky. And he did not want to be on this show. He wanted to be a director. And he like fell into this show, and it's just bizarre. I reading this thing, I'm like, oh man, poor Paul. He's had to do Hollywood dancing undercover.
Oh, come on. That always seemed like a really fun show to me.
Yeah.
But it's about friendship as well. Friendship in a cool car.
Yeah, that's all you need in life.
That's all you need. You need your road trip buddy and your wheels, and off you go.
Yeah, and then
do that.
Extortion rings operating in plush Hollywood dance studios.
That's just another day on the job, mate. I've also written down 9:30, Channel 29, Journey to Adventure, touring Ireland.
Yeah.
40 years ago, I would love to see what Ireland looked like to Americans 40 years ago.
I have some of those specials. Like our PBS did a lot of those, like Vacation in Ireland, as you would imagine. It's Boston. And it's very much every cliche you can imagine. It's like
they go and kiss the Blarney Stone.
Kiss the Blarney Stone. Here's a little old man who has sheep. Like that kind of stuff where it's just like
a donkey.
Yeah, let's go to the Guinness factory. Like it's just all the cliche things.
I would find that very soothing.
Yeah.
I think that would be quite ASMR for me at this stage to watch that. Yes, leprechauns.
I was in Newbury Comics, which is our local.
Yeah, I love Newbury Comics.
And there was a kid in there, like total Boston trash bag kid, you know, like Celtics jersey down around his knees, like a Southie kid. And he had gone on vacation to Ireland and he hated it because it wasn't even Irish.
Well, fuck him.
Because he's thinking of like American, you know, like corned beef and cabbage, like stuff you don't even have. And
it wasn't a theme park.
Yeah, he couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's kind of a metropolitan European, and he was like, yeah, like they're not even Irish no more. Like they didn't have like corned beef and cabbage. Like I'm like, they never had that stuff. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I kind of
some little fucker.
Oh yeah, that's what they really think it's going to be like. Southie, the country.
Oh man.
And you're like, no. Yeah.
Wow.
And
he's gonna burn his passport and never leave America again.
I just love the idea of some kid from Boston being like, you know, Ireland's like not even Irish anymore.
That's wonderful.
It's like, okay,
oh my
kid.
God. Let's hope he runs for politics.
Oh, he's probably already a state legislator at this point.
Sorry to disappoint you, mate.
Yeah, you can change it, but it's part of it is because of those kind of shows we would get a ton of them where it was just every cliche, you know.
Yeah, I like to kind of deliver. I've had people delivered to me and said, you know, my friend's coming over, can you look after them? And I do always take them to a pub where I know there's going to be a good session.
Yeah.
You know, it's the gift you can give people. There's like the one constant is there will be some lad with a fiddle in the corner of the good pub. So, but after that, everything's.
It's like when I have people who come over to visit Boston, you're like, I guess we can go on a duck tour and go, you know, like it's just the stuff you wouldn't do.
Yeah, what can you do? You can go to Cheers. That's comforting.
Yes, but it's the fake Cheers just closed, went out of business due to coronavirus. They had a fake one in Faneuil Hall, but the real one's still there. Yeah, you could do that. Just all that touristy stuff that no one ever does when you're from somewhere.
I'm sure I'm as guilty everywhere I've been.
It's fun though. You got to. What I always do is I'm like researching where I'm going to eat wherever I travel. That's my big thing. That's
the most important thing.
It really is. I'm like, what do I have to have here?
You don't want to be hangry on the streets of a new town.
No, you could cause an international incident.
Yeah, you get deported.
Exactly, yes. He was hangry and he's never allowed back.
Yeah, give her a sandwich, quick.
Yes, exactly. There's a weird show on that I've never heard of before called Future Cop. And
what time's that on?
It's on at 10 o'clock, and it is after the window that I told you.
You told me we weren't allowed to look.
I know, but it's just so weird that it struck my eye because it stars Ernest Borgnine as a cop from the future. Which is, and Joan Collins is in this episode.
This is a series?
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. It must have been like a short-lived series, but I need to try and find a copy of Future Cop with Ernest Borgnine.
He's just so... I'm not seeing it.
No.
There's nothing futuristic about Ernest Borgnine.
No, not in the least. Even in Escape from New York, which takes place in the future, he seems like he's from the past.
Yeah, he's very retro.
So that...
I would love to see it.
If I find an episode, I'll hook you up because I'm curious about that.
Ernest.
So that's Sunday. Monday you did Charlie's Angels. So are we on Tuesday?
Did we do Sunday? No, we haven't done Sunday.
Oh, you're still on Saturday. That's right.
Sunday, it's the Alamo versus the other airports.
Oh, yes. Airport 76.
Yeah. The other one with Dean Martin. But I would be watching Upstairs, Downstairs, the conclusion.
Oh, see, I've never seen those.
I wonder if you'd love it, because it was huge.
Oh, yeah.
It was the best show ever. Every character in Upstairs, Downstairs, the comedians would imitate them. People at school would talk about the characters. And this is the conclusion. It's so weird. It's like Upstairs, Downstairs dies, and the next night Charlie's Angels is born. Coincidence?
It's like the phoenix has risen from the ashes. Because basically Upstairs, Downstairs, it's like Downton Abbey, right?
Yes, Downton Abbey was definitely a tip of the hat to Upstairs, Downstairs. And the characters were just, but see the actors, the old actors in Upstairs, Downstairs, like the guy who played the butler was in The Great Escape,
right?
Or one of those wartime movies. He was a great Scottish character actor, and that, oh my god, it's so vivid to me watching that every week. And I've actually blanked on his name.
Oh, who's in it?
What's that movie where they escape from a German prison?
Oh, that's The Great Escape. Yeah. Gordon something his name was. He was brilliant. So but I think I never saw the concluding episode. So I read with great interest how did they wrap it all up? Yeah.
And it was because the dissolute, ne'er-do-well, super handsome son of the family has gambling debt, so they have to finally sell the grand old home. So, that sounds brilliant.
That's
that's all I'm watching.
That's an appropriately downbeat ending for an English show in 1977.
Oh, and I have scribbled underneath 10 o'clock after we've all gone to bed, the farewell, a tribute to Mrs. Bridges.
Yes.
And Mrs. Bridges was one of the characters. So I'd have to stay up on Sunday night to see that.
Fair enough. I think it's such a big event. You really have to. I would have gone with, there's a made-for-TV movie on at 9:30 premiering, and it's called The Possessed. And Harrison Ford is in it.
Ooh.
This is pre-Star Wars.
Yeah.
And they call it Special Effects Highlight The Possessed, a 1977 TV movie about a defrocked cleric played by James Ferrantino who battles demonic forces at an isolated girls' school. And
an Omen ripoff.
Yeah, and Harrison Ford's like the handyman at the school, basically.
Like typecast again.
Yep. Can you be a carpenter?
That's so weird because that's the same year as Star Wars.
Yeah, they would have shot it probably 6 months before they shot Star Wars.
Man, I wonder which one he enjoyed more.
Knowing a little bit about Harrison Ford, he probably hated both of them.
Really?
He's just very cantankerous. He's like, about everything.
Oh, I'm so disappointed to hear that.
He just seems like a guy who approaches that work like any working, like he approached carpentry, like, all right, time to get up and go to work, not.
Oh, well.
But I mean,
I always preferred Chewbacca anyway.
I think we all did.
I'd have put Chewbacca in charge of the Millennium Falcon.
Well, wasn't he, what was that, Peter Mayhew? Was that the guy's name?
Yeah, the big tall guy.
Yeah, he was the Green Man in those public service announcements where he's dressed as a superhero, like when to follow the Green Man, when to cross the street in the UK.
Didn't he play Darth Vader's body?
Yes, you're right. That's a different guy. You are correct.
Yeah. I don't know who was inside Chewbacca's because Chewbacca is real.
That's true. No one's inside him, just his own soul.
Only Chewbacca's inside Chewbacca.
That's true.
Yes, you're confused, Ken.
Sorry, kids.
You got muddled. You forgot Chewbacca is real.
It's this lockdown. It made me forget about about
you
Wookiees.
Get out, get some fresh air.
Yeah. I forgot that Wookiees are real. So you're watching Upstairs, Downstairs all night that night. Monday night, you're doing Charlie's Angels. And if terrorists attack, you're watching a movie.
Yeah, the old black and white movie. And now it's Tuesday.
Yes.
What have I written down? I've written country music hit parades at 8 o'clock.
Which is...
But it's up against Happy Days, which I loved.
Happy Days was enormous here.
I'm surprised it's on at 8:00 at night. Was it an evening show?
Yeah, because they probably put it on as kind of like a kids show in the UK, probably.
Yeah. It was like afternoon fun.
It was Tuesday nights were the Gary Marshall night. So it was all the shows Gary Marshall produced. So it was like Mork and Mindy, Laverne and Shirley, Happy Days.
Wow.
They would all be in this block along with Three's Company, which was not in that same block. But that was like the kids' night to watch TV every week.
Cool.
And it was an enormous show. It was huge.
Was Mork and Mindy on the same time, or was that more 80s?
It was a little later. It was more 80s.
Right.
But Happy Days had, and I think someone confirmed this, or if I am wrong, a listener will email me and tell me I'm wrong. But Happy Days had the most spin-offs of any TV show ever.
Really?
So it had Laverne
and Shirley.
Mork and Mindy, which was a spin-off.
Wait. Is that Happy Days related?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they introduced the characters on Happy Days and then spun them off into their own show.
They introduced Mork on Happy Days?
Yep. It doesn't make any sense.
The Cunninghams find an alien spaceship in their backyard?
I think they did it where, I forget exactly how they put it in. It was like a Fonzie thing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It was around the time where they stopped pretending that Happy Days took place in the 50s.
Oh, wow.
Just kind of like,
Sad day.
Yeah, when it was shot on video now. And then Blansky's Beauties, Joni Loves Chachi. There was one, Pinky Tuscadero had one.
Cool.
So it was
Leather Tuscadero?
Susie Quattro, who played Leather Tuscadero. Yeah, so they had so many spin-offs. There was cartoons. There was a cartoon of Happy Days.
Wow.
It was huge. And I had Donnie Most on, who is Ralph Malph. And
oh, really? What's he like?
He's a super nice guy. He always wanted to be a singer, actually. So now he fronts this like 12-piece swing band. And does like standards, like big band standards, and he does a lot of the casinos.
What a great, perfect career!
Yeah, it's fun. He did a. I watched the show. It's like a really fun big band show, and he's got a cool kind of croonery voice.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah, nice guy.
I loved it. I like the Fonz, although now I'm like, he's kind of old and ugly.
Oh yeah, he's not cool. Like talking about Teddy Boys, he is not what he seems like he would be. He's wearing a bomber jacket. He's not even in like a Wild One kind of biker thing.
Yeah.
It's weird. But on that night, hosted by Leonard Nimoy, Mr. Spock, is a 2-hour documentary In Search of Noah's Ark.
Enjoy.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I've written down, see, I couldn't watch that because she wore a yellow ribbon, talking to John Ford, and then the Wild Bunch.
Yeah.
So
Peck and
it would have to be that. So half an hour if she wore a yellow ribbon, followed by the Wild Bunch.
Just Sam Peckinpah violence scale.
Yeah, that would be perfect. Because the alternative is there's an Antonioni movie on, and it'd be like, obviously, to try and counterbalance the testosterone going on the other channels, but no, I'd love to see the Wild Bunch again.
I love that movie. So were you a big Western fan growing up, or was that something later?
Yeah. And I mean, we loved John Wayne.
Oh, weird.
He always seemed very Irish to me, which I realize now is John Ford.
Yeah.
It's more his sensibility. Yeah, so we just totally loved it. It was totally my dad's thing. My dad loved Johnny Cash, and, he loved America. And
that's pretty cool, though. And that's kind of rare, probably, right?
Not really, because the huge thing in Ireland is country and Irish.
That makes sense.
Which is kind of country music, but through an Irish sensibility. But my dad loved rock and roll as well. So every other friend of his ended up in the States anyway.
Oh, well, that makes sense. We do have a lot of them here. Yeah. They probably all live near me. But because when you did Straight to Hell, they shot that on the actual sets that a lot of the Eastwood movies were shot on.
The spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
Well, the actual set, which is mind-blowing now when you think about it.
Yeah. that would have, growing up watching those and then just being there would have been bonkers.
Well, that's the thing now. I didn't grow up with the spaghetti westerns. Clint Eastwood meant nothing to me.
I see.
Whereas I wasn't, the 60s weren't a big thing for me. Like, I was very in love with the 50s.
Yep.
And the 40s movies. It's weird. Like the 60s, like meh.
Well, you skip, like, your parents' generation always seems lame.
Well, whatever my parents would have been watching or listening to was my thing. And because my dad was a Ted in the 50s, he was very, he liked Bill Haley.
Oh, wow. So he was like a skiffle and stuff. Yeah. He was the one.
He liked all that 50s rock and roll, but he also loved country music. And so that totally is infused into my DNA as well.
That makes sense. I mean, it makes sense.
It makes sense.
What? So that's Tuesday. Then
so that's Tuesday. We're watching The Wild Bunch. So now it's Wednesday and it's The Bionic Woman.
Yeah, you got to do Bionic Woman.
Yeah. I didn't see any $6 Million Man on this week, so we'll just have to make do with Jamie.
I mean, to be honest, I preferred The Bionic Woman.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was a more fun show. I don't know why. Lee Majors wasn't as appealing.
Right. That's really cool.
He seemed to, like, he never seemed like he was actually in peril either.
No. And I always just thought he just wanted to be James Bond, and he wasn't.
But Jimmy Summers, there was nothing like that on TV.
She's not trying to be anybody. She's just the Bionic Woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was kind of a novelty, or just like you didn't see anything like that.
Yeah, it's just a kick-ass woman going around and doing shit.
Yeah.
And she's got circuitry, like win-win situation. Yeah. The $6 Million Man did have a great credit, so that whole We Can Rebuild Him.
Yeah.
Iconic.
That's all you need to see. Like, that's the whole show.
Yeah. Watch the trailer and then just go and do something else.
It's funny because Hollywood every couple of years will float around that they're remaking The $6 Million Man. And
really?
They never do it. They did do a remake of The Bionic Woman in the 2000s, which was okay-ish. But inevitably, whenever this circulates that they're remaking it, the article will always adjust the price for inflation.
Oh no! How much is $1 Million Man now?
So it'll be like, he's going to be the $10 billion man, or like they have to do the math. And I'm like,
it's like $10 billion man.
Just call it the Bionic Man. Like,
the evil.
Yes, 10 billion men. It's like, just don't do the math.
Oh no, don't do that. Just call him the Bionic Man. What else have we got here? I've written down Channel 11 Robbery. Robbery is a really good bad movie about the Great Train Robbery.
Oh.
Great Train Robbery. So it's got Stanley Baxter's in it, and that you should watch the trailer for that. It's kind of terrible but wonderful. And The Go-Between, Joseph Losey's movie's on. I met Joseph Losey when I was a homeless teenager, and I was billeted in this hostel in an incredibly posh part of London, now I think about it. And I was 17 and I was going to a memorial for Bobby Sands. And this old guy, an old guy with dogs, I was all punked up, 17, homeless street kid. I had my hair all spiky. And he said something about how I looked, but in a nice way. And I was very used to adults speaking to me aggressively, like you were saying, punks always trying to get beaten up and stuff. And you could tell he was actually intrigued rather than offended in any way. So I stopped to chat to him, and he had dogs as well, so he had to be all right. And he says, I'm like, where are you going? You look interesting. Where are you going? And I was like, I'm going to a memorial for Bobby Sands. And he went, oh, yes. So we were talking about Irish politics to this old fat American guy. And then he said, well, it's been very nice chatting with you. And I thought he said, I'm Joseph Lucky and I make films. And I hope you'll see my films one day. And I was like, oh, yeah, all right. And then years later, I saw a picture of Joseph Losey. And I went, holy shit, that's Joe Lucky. I met Joseph Losey.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Isn't that weird though? And I had no idea who he was. Joe Lucky. He was always Joe Lucky to me.
I'm Hollywood actor Joe Lucky.
No, he said I make films.
films.
I'm American. I make films, and that stuck in my head. But I got his name totally wrong.
Well, now I really need to see that movie.
Yeah, and of course that's up against Nixon.
But I'm all in with, weirdly, Race with the Devil.
Yes,
Which is such a great bad movie.
there was a real spate of them.
Oh yeah,
That kind-
Satanists. Huge.
I wonder if Peter Fonda was like proud of that one.
I don't know if he was, although he did get to ride a motorcycle, which I think he was happy if he got to ride a motorcycle in the movie, regardless of what else was in the movie.
Contract.
Yeah, I need a motorbike and I get to keep it. But yeah, that's my dad would not shut up about Race with the Devil when I was a kid. As like,
really,
he was like, "Oh, it's the scariest movie ever. They see these Satanists."
Did your dad have an RV?
No, it didn't make any sense. I'm like, so I saw it much later and I was like, what the hell is he talking about? This is like a camping.
I just can't, if there's an RV in it, I just can't engage.
Yeah, I'm like, your camping trip went bad?
There's nothing scary about an RV.
No, and I also don't find Satanists scary because they just seem so silly.
So silly. There was a fantastic one in the 60s that was I think it was called something like Psychomania.
Oh yes, with Birdie, what's her name is in it? They all die, the motorcycle gang, and they come back as zombies.
They come back, they deliberately kill themselves. They'll like ride their motors into the side of lorries and then they come back. Yeah, zombie motorcycle hooligans.
Yeah, that makes a great double feature with either These Are the Damned with Oliver Reed, that great sort of teenage delinquent movie, or Werewolves on Wheels, which is the werewolf motorcycle gang from the same year.
Notes.
Yes.
Werewolf on Wheels.
That one is pretty great. Beryl Reed. It's Beryl Reed in Psychomania.
Beryl Reed's in Psychomania, yes.
Yeah.
And is there something about frogs?
In Psychomania?
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a
I
long
have to
time.
watch it again.
Yeah, now I'm inspired to watch that again. That movie is super fun, just in the best way.
And Race with the Devil really isn't.
No. Psychomania is everything that Race with the Devil is not.
Yeah.
Because you called it Race with the Devil. You used the title of a great song. It should be way more exciting than it is.
It should be more exciting. It should be scary.
Yeah. And guys in robes, not scary.
No. Honestly, I think the scariest occult movie is The Wicker Man.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
And you know, there's no motorbikes. It's weird. It's all going on in your head.
Well, because Edward Woodward's so good, you just feel so bad for him. Plus, I mean, Christopher Lee, you can't go wrong.
No. And also, I didn't know the story the first time I watched, so it was a huge plot twist when you realize he's a virgin. It's like, whoa.
That's like one of the original, your mind is totally blown at the end of that movie. Like you feel like you went through something after seeing that movie. You need a minute.
He's in there and you're like, ah!
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Oh yeah. Because you're like, you can't do that. This is insane.
So you can't finish it here. Doesn't somebody rescue him?
Yeah. And it's nope. This is what it is. And it's yeah, it's such a good movie. That movie is terrifying. Yeah, man, I love Christopher Lee. I talked to him once. When I worked at WFNX, which was like a alt rock station in Boston. And
what was he doing there?
He was promoting, I think it was Lord of the Rings of all things.
Oh, cool.
And I was the morning show producer, and it was like kind of a cheesy morning show, you know, like the, hey, wow, good morning. And they had no idea who he was. And
oh, what?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, you should ask him about singing. Cause he had just put out an album. He put out an opera album and he put out a heavy metal album too. That's actually pretty good. And he was,
talent.
Oh yeah, he had a great voice and he was kind of standoffish because he clearly had been doing a bunch of interviews and he's, 70. Oh. But then they were like, oh, you did an album? And he goes, yes. And then he started singing and he was so excited and he goes, that is the baritone. Like, he was just like, yeah. And it was so cool.
Showbiz.
Yep. That's all I was
Oh,
talking
what
about.
a great story.
Yeah, it's weird hearing guys like that, hearing their voice, you know?
Yeah, wow.
Like
That would rearrange my molecules.
yeah, I was in London.
Actually,
Like, the air comes in, you're like, that's Christopher Lee.
oh my God.
I was in London years ago, and I was in Forbidden Planet, the comic book store.
Yeah.
And just by happenstance, David Warner was in there, and Sarah
God.
Douglas was in there, and they were doing a signing of something. But I didn't know. I was just in there, and I heard David Warner, who has that real distinctive voice.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? And I turned around, and I'm like, oh my God. Like, it's just so weird.
Was he tall in real life?
Very tall.
He looks enormous.
He was because I'm 6'3". He was taller than I am. He was probably
Whoa.
6'5", which is weird for an
Yeah.
actor. Normally they're little people.
Yeah, because you have to fit them in the.
Yeah. But he's a big guy, and he was very nice, but you get why he plays those intimidating, sinister characters.
Cool.
It was-
God, he was in everything when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, he was the go-to time after time.
He has a good career.
Yeah, I love David Warner. So what's that? Oh, is that Wednesday done and we're on Thursday?
That's Wednesday. Thursday. You probably know this. I'd never heard of it. The Mind of Mr. Soames.
I don't know this. I've not heard of this.
Write a note to yourself to watch the trailer. It's Terence Stamp as a baby who goes into a coma when he's born, and when he's revived, he's in a 30-year-old body. But he's a
That's
baby.
weird. So this is from 1970. Yeah, unusual tale about a man facing the world after 30 years in a coma.
But he's a baby, so it's all Terence Stamp, like people trying to teach him to drink, and he's like, oh,
That
it's horrible.
that
But
sounds
also,
awful.
twist, he's actually killed somebody.
Oh, of course. So it's like an Of Mice and Men Lenny kind of situation or something, right?
Is this baby a killer? And there's Terence Stamp, and you're like, do they mean baby in the Austin Powers sense of baby? Or
No, that if you told me you're like, I had the weirdest dream last night, Terence Stamp was a baby, I'd be like, I think we need to have you talk to somebody.
the only way that film got made is Terence Stamp. There's no way anyone would make it.
It'd be funny if that was like his passion project. Like he was like pushing for years to make this movie. He's like, this will be the crowning achievement.
Yeah, it's like I don't want to play Hamlet. I want to play a baby who's a killer.
A 30-year-old murderous coma baby.
Honestly, I watched the trailer like this, like just like, oh my God, it's the most squirm. I squirmed so hard.
Oh, now I have to see that.
I'd watch a minute of it, but then I'd turn, because Welcome Back, Kotter. It's one of those things I've heard of, and I know John Travolta was in it, but I've never seen it. So now I get to go back in the time machine and watch it.
Oh, wow. It's real bad, but is so 70s and was enormous, like hugely popular here. Like lunchboxes and toys popular.
Right. I know the name because whenever anybody mentions John Travolta, it was always from Welcome Back, Kotter. And now there's memes, of course.
Yeah.
What's that from?
It was based on a stand-up comedian named Gabe Kaplan, who was kind of like a sarcastic stand-up. And the concept was he went to this rough school, and I think it's in Queens or might be Brooklyn. And then he comes back as an adult as a teacher in this school, and the kids give him crap, basically. That's the whole thing. And Travolta played a character named Vinnie Barbarino. And it's basically like his character from Saturday Night Fever if he was a 30-year-old baby.
It's obviously the night for 30-year-old babies.
Yeah. It's a beloved show, and I was too young for it, so I don't have any of the nostalgia for it. So whenever I've tried to watch it, I'm like, this is awful.
Okay, yeah.
I think you had to
I'm
go up with
going to try and watch it, though. I'm going to watch it but then at 9 o'clock, Hawaii Five-O is on.
Yeah.
Which I immediately, as soon as I saw that, I said, I'm watching that. But then just under it, it said Richard Pryor.
Yes. This is when Richard Pryor had his own sketch show for a really
with
short
John
time.
Belushi and Maya Angelou.
Yeah. This show was amazing. It was like 6 episodes he did. I can't believe the stuff he got away with.
Wow.
They're all on DVD now and streaming online, so you can watch it. It's real good. And it's like, it's him at sort of the height of his powers. And he's doing a sketch show that is not watered down for a non-Black American audience in any way.
Cool.
And it is really good. It is really good.
I have to find that.
I
thought that it's, Richard Pryor and John Belushi. I went, oh yeah, that makes sense. And Maya Angelou. I went, hang on, something's going on here. Because
Pryor was huge on sort of getting Black arts culture on TV, and it's he had the pull at that point to do it. It's just, there's songs in it with Gladys Knight and the Pips. Like it's what he got away with on that show is just amazing.
That's so cool. It's a shame it's up against Hawaii Five-O because I love that. And I actually saw an old episode maybe 2 years ago. And the thing that struck me seeing it again was it was made for a much longer attention span.
It's very slow.
You'd watch a scene and there'd just be seconds would tick by when people would just look at each other or look at something. Whereas, there was a remake of it, which was like an action movie. It was just cut, 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 cut. And then you see the original and you just thought, wow, there really has been a diminution of attention span within a generation. That's evolution in reverse.
Yeah, what we are not considering is the influence of MTV 4 years later, where those fast cut videos started affecting everything. And it is, seeing TV from the 70s action shows, it seems like a snail's pace slow.
Yeah.
Which I like
sometimes. I found watching the old one very relaxing, but it just, at the end of every scene, it'd be like, I could feel myself ready for the cut that wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, tick, tick, tick. Oh, this is interesting. Well, what seemed totally normal to me when I was a kid and now seems incredibly slow.
It's funny, too, because they think they tried to get by on just the novelty of Hawaii, because this is when America was really obsessed with Hawaii, because it had just become a state in 57 or 58. We had the Elvis special. The Brady Bunch went to Hawaii. Like, Hawaii was sort of enough to just do everything in Hawaii.
Oh, I loved Hawaii Five-O. I thought it was super cool.
It was one of the only shows my grandfather watched, and my grandfather was a big, angry guy from Norway, and he would sit in the kitchen just smoking in the dark. And the only thing he watched was Price is Right and his Hawaii program, which was Hawaii Five-O. Like, he'd start hearing the music, and he'd come running in and watch. That's all he watched. Real weird.
That's interesting. I guess if you're from Norway, Hawaii would be enough.
Yeah, that's pretty much the anti-Norway in all ways.
Yeah. I think, looking back, I think my dad's thing was he really liked Jack Lord. Jack Lord was just a solid man in a sharp suit.
Big quiff, and he's just had like the...
Yeah, he had a quiff and a suit, and he looked like my dad, so it's just like... Yeah, that's what men were men.
If you were a teddy boy, Jack Lord would be like your king.
He'd be your cop buddy who made good.
Yeah.
It's up against Playboy of the Western world, which is amazing to see in there. A great part of the Irish theatrical canon with actual Abbey Theatre actors, like the cream of Irish acting in this great old play. I didn't write down the channel. 9 o'clock.
Yeah, Channel 12. It's on our PBS. John Hurt is in it.
Yeah. John Hurt lived in Ireland. We adopted him.
Did you see the Who Do You Think You Are with him? That show about so it's a genealogy show. I don't know if you ever saw it. Like people.
Oh, like This Is Your Life.
Yes, and so people would go trace their family history, and that one, John Hurt was like, when I come to Ireland, I just feel it in my blood, and I just know that I'm Irish. And then they traced his genealogy, and there's 0 Irish.
That's so funny.
It was like,
it's probably more because he looked like a jockey.
Yeah.
Probably because he smoked and he looked like he was a jockey, so he'd be right at home in Ireland.
Yeah,
that's so funny. I got completely, when these ancestry things came out that you could get your ancestry, I thought finally I'm going to find out where the fuck I'm from, because I do not look like anybody. I don't look like anybody I know in Ireland. I don't look like anybody I know in Scotland, which is, my mum and my dad, Ireland and Scotland. And I was convinced I was from some weird little micro genetic climate out in the Russian steppes, and from a long line of horse riding warrior women. And now I'm like 2/3 Irish and 1/3 Scottish.
You're not from Wonder Woman Thanaskara. You're exactly what you thought. I was
completely convinced I've got to be some kind of weird Caucasian, Anyway, I thought, they're going to dig up my DNA in a 2,000-year-old woman who was buried with an axe.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like you don't want to, like I did one of those tests, and I looked in my genetic history. I'm like the whitest white ever. Like it was literally like 99.9% like Irish, English, Western Europe. And then there was like 1% like Nordic. It was the most white thing ever.
Oh man. So that was the end of that. Yeah. It was spooky because it was so precise. It said exactly Munster, which is where my dad's from, and this part of the east of Scotland where my mum's from. I was like, how the fuck do they do that?
Yeah, how is that in your exact that is freaky.
Yeah, but it's inbreeding as well. Obviously, generations of, if they can pinpoint it that precisely, that means people didn't move around much.
Yeah.
Which means there's a lot of third and second cousins.
Oh, the good old days.
Thank goodness for aeroplanes.
Exactly. Yes. They sometimes give us
Irish out of the village.
They sometimes give us global pandemics, but also stop the inbreeding.
Yeah. Expand the gene pool a bit.
Right.
Oh my God. So Friday. Oh, we're on the last day. Donny and Marie.
Did you get that over there?
Yeah. And did the Osmonds have their own show? Because the Osmonds were huge.
Yep, they absolutely did. So the Osmonds had a weekly variety show, and then Donny and Marie also had their own weekly variety show.
Oh, man.
I used to be terrified of Little Jimmy Osmond.
Yes.
So weird looking.
Chucky.
Yeah, you're like, oh, yeah. He didn't look like any of them, and he did look like Chucky.
Yeah, he was this little homunculus. He was too wide for his height, and it was just like, what's going on with that lad?
And they'd always
had a huge #1 hit.
Jimmy Osmond did?
Yeah, I'll Be Your Long-Haired Lover from Liverpool.
I've never heard that.
It's horrifying. It is. It's like watching Chucky come to life.
So you wouldn't recommend I check that out?
I would recommend it. Oh my God, it'd be right up your street. He was on top of the pops every week. It was like,
oh God, because on those variety shows, they would always like surprise you with him. Like they knew, because it would always be like, it's the Osmonds, and they all come out dancing, and then they'd be like, and Little Jimmy, and he'd be like, ah, like it was never.
Yeah, creepy kids.
Yeah,
but my memory of Donny is there was the big war. Like I was too young for the Beatles versus the Rolling Stones. So for my generation, we got David Cassidy versus Donny Osmond.
Which side were you on?
That was the choice you had to make.
Where did you land?
I didn't like either of them. Honestly, I was like, I like the Bay City Rollers, I will admit, because they were rock and roll. They did kind of good old doo-woppy rock and roll. And, you know, Donny and Marie and the, what was the other lad? David Cassidy. Like, we watched the programs, but it was really wet.
It's really cheesy and like just it's like eunuch rock and roll. Like it's sanitized. The funniest thing to me about Donny Osmond is he had a hit song in '89, I think, called Soldier of Love, if you remember that terrible song. It was like a thief in the night, can't get enough, I'm a soldier of love. It was just this cheesy pop song. But he released it initially under the name The Mystery Artist because no one would play a Donny Osmond song. And
wow.
It became a top 40 hit, top 10 hit. And then they were like, it's Donny Osmond.
And immediately fell out of the chart.
Yeah, but it was such a weird thing to do.
That's so interesting.
And I remember as a kid being like, the Mystery Artist. It's like,
and would they actually read that out? That was Soldier of Love by the Mystery Artist.
Yeah, and it didn't somehow, which is crazy to think now, it somehow didn't leak that it was him.
Wow.
And it didn't come out till he revealed it. It's like,
that's really interesting.
And he says,
like a white label cover up kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, Donny. I wonder who dreamed that up for him, or if he did.
I doubt it. Couldn't have been him. I'm like, there's no way. But it's brilliant because he got past that Teen Idol thing, and then he had a pretty decent size, like adult contemporary career.
Really cool. I have a feeling Cliff Richard. Do you know who Cliff Richard is?
Oh yeah, the young ones.
I feeling he tried the same thing.
That wouldn't have worked. You know it's Cliff Richard when he's singing.
Yeah. Or if he gave an interview kind of talking about prejudice against him because he's Cliff Richard. Yeah. Well, good for Donny. I think that's pretty cool.
It's the coolest thing he did. And in this particular episode, Paul Anka is in it. But Paul Lynde is in it. And Paul Lynde is playing Leonardo da Vinci in a sketch.
Who's Paul Lynde?
Paul Lynde was in Bye Bye Birdie. If you've seen that musical with Anne Margaret. Do you ever see Bewitched?
Yeah.
He's Uncle Arthur. So he's the guy who's super gay, but isn't.
Yes.
That's Paul Lynde. He was on Our Hollywood Squares, which is Celebrity Squares.
That guy.
Yeah, who's like, oh,
he's fabulous. Paul Lynde. And I never thought of his name. He's superb. Yeah. He was always kind of like, he just listened and then he'd just say something devastating.
Yep. That was Paul Lynde. In 1978, he had a Halloween special variety show with him and Kiss. It's real weird.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, that's on Amazon. The Paul Lynde Halloween special with Kiss.
So he made a musical with Anne Margaret. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, that was the first thing he did. Like, if you ever heard that song, Kids, What's the Matter with Kids These Days? Kids, that song. Or he sang that song in Bye Bye Birdie, the musical. And he got famous for that and then started showing up in a lot of TV shows. But yeah, he's a real weird character. But I would watch that just for this. Like Paul Lynde playing Leonardo da Vinci, sold.
Oh, I bet he's funny. Right after that, I've written, An American in Paris is on, which is what I would probably really watch. But I've also written, because all through the TV guide, there's this thing about the fight against slavery, a major TV experience, the real story of Roots. Now, Roots was huge, and I watched that. So I'm thinking it's Friday. I should probably watch an episode of the fight against slavery. But it would also be really depressing, and it's Friday night.
Very.
So I'd probably end up watching An American in Paris.
Yeah, there's good stuff on the Rockford Files is on that night, which I don't know if that ever made its way over. But that was James Garner.
I never watched it.
It's a cool show. It's like, a down on his luck kind of bum detective, and Tom Atkins. Yeah, everyone likes that.
The last thing I've written down is actually this. You can tell what day I wrote this because I've written down Wildfire, the endless war against forest fires. And I remember reading that and just thinking, would they have any idea? Because there's some statistic they've written there in the guide. it's something like 118,000. I think you should see what just burnt today in California in one day.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane. When I was out, because I go out for a few months every year to LA, and when I was out there last October, it was October, there was huge wildfires. And weirdly, considering what's going on now, I got really freaked out because I would see people jogging in masks. And the thing that freaked me out was, you know, as someone who grew up watching all this dystopian sci-fi as a kid, that people just adapt to this really weird thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, literally the world's on fire. And you're like, gonna go do my jogging. And, you know, it's stupid now given how everything is, but that really freaked me out.
Wow.
Yeah.
But then what can you do? You know, it's like,
we adapt, and that should be sort of like uplifting, but to me it was like terrifying.
Yeah, because we wouldn't have to adapt if we hadn't got ourselves in. This is the great guilt I carry now, because I'm doing this radio show now where it's all kind of, all the music is, all my picks kind of 1980 is the bullseye, and everything kind of circles around that. And I keep thinking about when I was 15 and who I was when I was 15. And I became a lifetime member of Greenpeace. And now I'm like 40 years later, and everything that I thought I would have fixed by now is worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Like instead of people taking it more seriously, they've grown into, I think, ignoring it more, which is...
well, there's a great sense of helplessness, you know, when I'm reading about the forest fires, and I'm just thinking, wow, you know, and they're saying it's the endless war against forest fires. I just think, how did we go from that and people fighting to the fact it's just slid, and it's just worse and worse and worse. And yeah, because we're helpless, so all we do is adapt.
Yeah, and we just, in our gauge of what's a big deal gets bigger and bigger. So they're like 118,000 acres. It's horrible. And that's, to your point. Yeah. That's like today.
Today, 500,000 acres. Yeah. It's true. It's like our attention span, you know, the cuts get quicker and quicker and quicker, and everything gets exponentially worse. And all the time we're like, you know,
what are you going to do? Oh, well, yeah.
You know, what should we
I think people got, at least here, with all the environmental stuff we got in the 70s and 80s and all the like Cold War stuff, I feel like a generation of people just hit a wall where they were like, I don't care anymore. Like, it was too much of like, we got to do this, you got to do this, save this, and they were just like, forget it. Like it like came out the other side or something. I don't know. Maybe it'll turn around.
There's a thing called learned helplessness, which comes up a lot in psychology, and I think that thing where people just keep say if you're an idealist when you're a kid, and then everything does get worse and worse, then you would just give up at some point because you can't do anything. The thing with Trump for me is I've always perceived my lifetime as progress. Like, I was born in 65, and in the 70s there was women's lib, you know, and feminism. Yeah. And then in the 80s we had the beginning of the peace process in Ireland, which we achieved in the 90s. And then in the 2000s, you know, there's been progress, and all the time civil rights at the same time. And it's like we've just hit a brick wall.
And we're regressing. It's like
regressing. Yeah. We had all this progress. America had a black president. We're like, yeah, you know, the glorious continuous arc of history. Bam.
Yeah, it's the people who... because a lot of people are like, oh, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I imagine everybody here has to be like, no. But there are people who are like, yeah, it's great for me. And I'm like, how? I don't understand how. Like, where are you living?
Yeah. And even if it's great for one person, you know, if the actual air becomes unbreathable and there's no water and there's no fish left, or they're all half plastic,
it's
what's your money going to do for you?
I'm a huge George Romero fan who made Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And I always watched all of his movies, but in the last year especially, they've been sort of haunting me because all of his movies, at least the original Dead movies, they're all allegories. And the first one is about a new society. It's basically about civil rights. The second one's about consumerism. But the third one is about ignoring the problem. And it's basically the world gets overrun with zombies because we ignored it, when if we had just done the right thing in the first place, it could have easily been, if we'd all worked together, we could have taken care of it. And seeing these things where people didn't learn these lessons from things like the Twilight Zone and things like that, I'm just like, didn't you see this stuff when you were growing up? And it's weird how that stuff like haunts me now.
Oh man.
And
which one's the third one? So there's The Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead.
There's Night of the Living Dead from 68. There's Dawn from 79 and Day from 85.
And is it the Day of the Living Dead?
Yes.
And that's the one?
Yep. And it's these scientists and military people, and they're living in this underground bunker trying to figure out what to do, but it's just chaos. Like it's just, we ignored it so long that there's no one in charge and there's nothing to do. And it's kind of grim. And weirdly, it's the only one of his movies that has an upbeat ending. But
oh yeah,
they get away and they make it to this Caribbean island, and but it's like, don't ignore, because they're not a threat in the movies. They're very slow moving, and the reason that they kill people is because people are selfish and they're trying to save themselves, or they're ignoring the problem, or we could easily take care of it, but people don't.
Oh wow.
And it's like, we knew this.
What visionary he was.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was a smart guy, and he knew what he was doing. And but he made a fourth one, which actually Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright are in, and it's about rich people trying to buy their way out of it. So they live in literal big towers above it, while the plebs all have to deal with it down here. And the point of that one is, you can't buy your way out of it.
Good.
You can think you are for a little bit, but you can't. And
yeah, at some point. That's so weird. This is the thing I keep coming back to. I grew up reading 2000 AD.
Yes.
And Judge Dredd, and this all it just seems like training for now.
Yeah. Yeah, same.
Okay, now I'm ready.
Yeah, I mean, like, even look at, like, speaking of Alan Moore, like V for Vendetta, or which was in 2000 AD, I think, originally, or all that stuff. You're like, yeah, anyone who was smart and kind of could make a couple of leaps logically forward to the future kind of pretty much nailed it.
They saw all this. I can see frames in my head that I saw when I was a kid, that it's the post-pandemic world. We're all going to be living like rats under broken freeway bridges while the rich people zoom by.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It makes the chasm between the people with money and people
that's it, because it's not rich people now. It's like ultra wealthy and everyone else.
Yeah, there's no middle.
We're on the wrong side.
Have you seen, there's a documentary about 2000 AD called Future Shock.
No.
It's awesome. It's about
why am I not in it?
I know, I was gonna say, it's really good. It's about the whole trajectory of that magazine, and it's really good. Grant Morrison's all in there. It's great.
Oh, I'd enjoy that very much.
I've given you a big list of homework now of things to watch.
It's just so cool. It starts at Spanish Dracula and it goes down to 2000 AD.
We did it.
So that was a good week.
That is a pretty good week. I have stuff to watch now. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that we were able to do it.
It was really fun going in that time capsule. Please watch the Mind of Mr. Soames trailer.
I will.
Terence Stamp, the 30-year-old baby.
I'll do it tonight.
No, Terence, no.
There you go. How great is she? Rocky O'Riordan, everybody, as she is her DJ nom de plume. I think that's what you would call it. But check out her Sirius Satellite radio show. It is on the YouTube channel, and it is great. Again, great opportunity to catch up with old friends on the show, and we're all feeling isolated, and it was almost normal. It felt like having coffee, although I didn't drink coffee when I was recording the show. Maybe I should have. I don't know. These are out loud musings that you don't need to hear, and I probably don't even need to say. If you'd like to say something to me, you can at tvguidancecounselor@gmail.com or ken at icanread.com. Also on social media at Kenneth W. Reed, REID, or at TV Guidance. You can go to our Patreon, patreon.com/TV Guidance Counselor. Thank you everybody who gives to that Patreon. If you give $1, I try to put up extra content, bonus content when I can. Let me know what kind of content you would like, what would drive you to be a patron of the show. I know times are tough, so if you don't have any money, fine too. But let me know how you're doing. This is a weird time, and I like to hear how you're doing, good or bad. It's fun to commiserate, but also nice to hear that things are going well for you. Tell me what you're watching. If might be something I've never heard of. I just caught up on Wayward Pines, which was excellent, but that's a discussion for another time. Maybe I'll do that in my year-end wrap-up. Anyway, speaking of wrap-ups, that's it. That's the end of the show. We'll see you again next week for a brand new edition of TV Guidance Counselor. So,
maybe you just don't like people, Ken. I think it's good to waste your life watching old movies.